What's the most amazing coincidence that has ever happened to you? I was at a bar in Dallas on St. Patrick's Day and I asked a guy about 30 years older than me if I could borrow a lighter. He said something back in a Dublin accent. I asked if he was from Dublin. He said yes. I jokingly said, I wonder if you know my dad, he is from Dublin. The guy of course says no way, it is a huge city, but my grandfather owned a building with his name on it real big. So I asked if he knew of the street it was on. Then I asked him if he knew my grandfather's building. Turns out he used to work for my grandfather and lived with my uncle and was in fact friends with my dad. Small world. Being Irish is literally one giant game of 6 degrees of separation. Went for coffee with a potential new housemate with 2 other confirmed housemates. Get chatting to the potential new housemate and find out she's from Spain. One of my confirmed housemates is from Spain and asked where she was from. Long story short, they're from the same town, went to the same school, and live streets away from each other. Further conversation reveals that they were actually part of the same group of friends when they were really young kids, and their parents used to hang out together, and they both coincidentally left Spain at the same time to go to the same, not very well known or big university, and nearly ended up living together. Nearly? Yeah. What happened? Rules are rules. Only one Spaniard per household. Don't wanna risk an inquisition. /r/unexpected. I picked up the house phone to call a friend, and he was already on the line. He had called me, and I had picked up the receive just before it had a chance to ring. Blew my fucking mind. When I was in college in Texas, back in the early 90s, I took a summer trip to England. My flight left on the last day of classes. I had an English paper due that day, and the prof insisted that it was due in his box by noon. Of course I procrastinated and didn't turn it in until 1 o'clock, and mine was the only paper in there. I was sure I had screwed up, but I had to go catch my flight. I got to London and the next day I was on the tube, telling my friend that I was sure I had failed the class because the prof never got my paper. It's going to be hanging over my head the entire trip, I said. There's no way I'll know if he got my paper. We arrived at our stop. The doors opened, and there was my prof, waiting for the train. Professor X, did you get my paper? Yes. Yes I did. Great. Thanks, I said, and went on to enjoy my holiday. Lightning fast grader. Exactly. Everyone gets a B. I actually wondered if he was on my flight. As a kid my parents took me to Butlins one year, a all-inclusive kid-friendly holiday park in the UK, and got on really well with the neighbors. The next year we went to Spain, and the same family was in the same hotel for the same 2 weeks as us. The next year we went to a different Butlins and our first week there was the same family's second week. My parents and their parents made plans to meet up again the next year, and we never saw each other again. I like how that ended abruptly when plans were made. Oh fuck, they noticed. Fucking panic. Mate was making fun of me because I had white paint on my blazer. Guy got shat on by a seagull. Straight out of a comedy flick. When I was in college my girlfriend and I were doing the hostel thing in Europe one summer. We were broke, but her mom worked for a big airline, so the airfare was super cheap. After London we went to Paris, and her mother suggested that we look up her old work colleague Kurt and see if we could stay with him. Free board. Sounds great. So we called, and his wife answered. Kurt was out of town, but call back tomorrow once they'd had a chance to talk. We did, and Kurt said it would be fine. Gave us directions and we were set. When we got off at the metro we were immediately lost, but we called Kurt back, and he said just wait. He'd come get us, which he did. Everything was immediately super awkward, but what are you gonna do? The small talk was even more strained. So, you still work for Delta? No, I'm in technical writing. Weird. Basic details just were not lining up. We got back to their house. I took a shower. His daughter come home from school, and it has probably been 90 minutes since we'd met face to face, and Kurt decides to drop this bomb on us. Hey listen, you seem real nice, but I don't think that I know who you are. I talked to my wife though, and if you want you can stay here for the night, but you're Kurt. I am. But I never worked for Delta, and I don't think we've ever met. True. We called back her mom. Turns out we had Kurt's phone number 1 digit off. We'd swapped a 5 for a 2, called the wrong number, and got a different American named Kurt, living in Paris, and then we'd gone to his house, pretended to know each other. I took a damn shower, and then we all agreed we were total strangers. We called the /right/ number, Got the real Kurt who lived like 2 miles away, and whose daughter was in the same class at school. Both Kurts were lovely, but we opted to stay with the one we knew. Sounds like a comedy. This summer, see the family comedy everybody is raving about Ledig's Kurt. Going to a bar in a different country. Bartender wanted to see my identification, so I showed him my state ID. I have somewhat of a rare name. Turns out that was exactly his name as well. He called his father who came down to meet me as well. We had a good conversation over some beers. Bill Buttliker. Whoa. That family built this country, by the way. Buttliker, our prices have never been lower. A couple of summers ago, I was in my kayak in a shallow inlet of my favorite lake in the Finger Lakes region of New York. I'd stopped to eat my sandwich and read the book I'd brought with me. One sentence read. Just then, a great blue heron flew overhead. I looked up and just then, a great blue heron flew overhead. Nothing better than summer in the Finger Lakes. I was hit by decompression illness. The Benson lost the ability to coherently communicate. It's very similar to having a stroke. I started wandering aimlessly down an island road and stumbled upon a random medical center. Perfect. Upon entering I realized I couldn't speak properly, and most people thought I was on drugs. I was unable to tell anyone what was happening, and as I'm being turned away, the dive instructor I was diving with was right behind me. Between where I was and the dive center there were easily 3 or 4 medical clinics he could have gone to. But he went to this one. He was able to fill in my forms for me as I couldn't remember my name. Even better, my landlord owned the only decompression chamber on the island, so she zoomed me straight in without having to wait for paperwork. Luckiest day of my life. Did you recover completely, immediately? Not really. It's been a year and I have memory issues, but I'm a dive instructor too, and I keep teaching. Wait, memory issues a year later? WTF is the Benz exactly? Your blood turns into blood soda. I'm attorney. I met with a client pursuing disability benefits. Very sick and very sympathetic. She had an open and shut case. To the point I even suggested that she file on her own, so she could avoid paying me anything. You don't know my maiden name. It's Miss Smith. You represented my brother 2 years ago. You arranged for members of the community to rebuild his house. If I end up paying $10,000 it would not be enough to cover what you have done for my family. I was literally thinking about quitting what I do, just the day before. But first, we make all the lawyers feel wholesome. When I was young I lived in Germany, military brat. My brother and I played with the neighbor's son who was about our age, younger than me, older than my brother. The German boy's mother had an older sister who lived in the US. Jump years forward, and I'm in college. My wife and I were dating seriously, and I went to Chicago to meet her family for the first time. While there I discovered that her neighbor was the sister who had moved to the US. Even crazier, her oldest son owned a business in the town my parents had retired in. The final crazy part of the entire coincidence is shortly after we married I was offered a job in Pennsylvania. We moved and once we got a place met the neighbors. One of them was the original German boy I played with as a child going to school here in the States. It's been over a decade since, and no other cray run-ins. But never know what tomorrow will bring. Crazy how small the world really is. I moved to Vegas and worked at a car dealership and a girl I went to high school with randomly walked in with her parents one day like 4 years later. My husband, his older sister and his mother all had the exact same dream about his twin sister randomly dying one night. When I asked if any of them were going to call her and check up on her they all looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, I get it. I'm not superstitious really, but it was such a weird dream for them all to have. She was fine, by the way. I always check on people when I have dreams like this. When I was 9, I had a best friend named Naomi. The next year, I moved to another state and Naomi and I lost touch. Nearly 8 years later, when I was taking a standardized test to get into college, who do I run into at the test center? Naomi. Now here's the best part. The test was in a different state to the one we previously lived in. Also, all the candidates writing the test were randomly assigned test centers within the state. Best coincidence ever. Did you reconnect? I was going to Malta from the US for a work trip. I had a layover in Rome, so I extended it so I could stay the weekend in Rome before the show. Sure enough, bags didn't make it to Rome. I was told they would be getting in on my same flight from Rome to Malta. Show up to Malta, no bags. There were a couple colleagues on my flight and their luggage was also lost. We submitted our claims, walked out of the airport defeated, and a colleague nonchalantly / sarcastically says, "That's probably your bag in the bushes over there." It was. But how did it get there lol? And did you guys get all our bags back? No idea, and after a few days they all showed up. My bag was perfectly intact. Wasn't missing a thing. My dad makes shepherd's pie for dinner sometimes, but he hadn't in nearly a year. One day at school, a couple of my friends made shepherds in their cooking class. I had some, and it was pretty good, and I planned on asking my dad to make it one day soon. I arrived home later that day, and told my dad, "I think you can guess what was already in the oven." "Your two friends from school?" I was kicked out of a concert in Grand Prairie, Texas. It was at a large venue, and I got in front row, and yelled that the singer sucked. 10 years later I had moved like an hour from my hometown, and got a roommate that I didn't know. One night he was telling me the story about the concert and the guy who was kicked out. Apparently he was also there, and thought it was great. I was so scared your roommate was going to be the singer. Went grocery shopping with GF. We both bought pineapples. We checked out through adjacent lanes. When I got to her home, she realized she forgot to take the pineapple she had bought. So I told her she can have mine, and I will go to the store on my way home, and pick up hers. When I went to the car, I realized I forgot my pineapple too. So imagine, me going to one lane asking, "Did I leave a pineapple here?" Then walking to the next lane, with a pineapple in hand, and asking the same question. Both cashiers had a what the hell look on their faces. This made me laugh. On honeymoon, halfway across the world on a 30-person plane between small cities in Thailand, we deplane and I hear my name called. Classmate from 10 years prior, was great friend, was on the same plane. Was depressed one Sunday morning, so I skipped church and went to a nearby park to read a comic strip collection under a tree. 10 minutes later, someone called out my name. It was someone who recognized my face because we'd gone to high school together. He asked why I was sitting all alone during lunch. I followed him to the grill tent, where people greeted me warmly, and I got some lunch. It was my own 10th high school reunion. This makes me happy. I had gone to St. Augustine for a short weekend trip. On the way there I just happened to think about this girl I'd gone to college with in Orlando. Hadn't talked to her in years and just kinda wondered what she might be up to. Ran into her in a bar there the first night. She was there celebrating graduating PA school, and we got a chance to catch up. So, the first time I ever farted in front of my GF was the exact time she farted in front of me for the first time. We were laying in bed and we both farted and looked at each other confused and anxious. We laughed quite a bit after. That's adorable. It's something. My first wife had a boyfriend in high school that became CEO of the largest producer of pornography in the world. My second wife was the first insurance executive to insure a pornography producer. It launched her career. Same guy. And your third wife, that guy. Starring in Minimum Coverage. Back before cell phones, my twin sister, U/Tasha 8NZ, and I would call each other on the landline. Often one of us would pick up the phone, just as the other finished dialing, and it wouldn't ring on either end. It happened all the time. I was at a Walmart with my dad just after a snowstorm, when we found a dash cam on sale for about $5. We thought, hey, that's a good deal, and bought it. We finished shopping, and hooked it up in his truck, to make sure it worked properly, and drove away. As we left the parking lot, I looked at him and said, "You know, it'd be pretty funny if we got into a car accident on the way home." We laughed, and continued on our merry way. 10 minutes down the road, some lady loses control of her car going around an icy curve, and slams into us. Her car's totaled, our car's totaled, but thankfully no one is hurt. The cops that arrived initially thought that we were at fault, due to how the tire marks in the snow looked, but thanks to the dash cam we literally just bought, we were cleared of any wrongdoing. Still creeps me out that I called a car accident, and I avoid making that joke now out of fear that God will call me out on my bullshit again. You forgot to knock on wood. I went on a mediocre first date with a guy on Tinder. The topics of conversation never really reached past what do you like to do for fun, what do you do for work level, so I didn't know much about him. Later in the week I had a dream that he was previously married and got divorced 1 year and 4 months prior. I thought it was a funny dream and a way to start a conversation about weird dreams, but it got awkward fast when he told me that was the date he separated from his ex-wife and is in fact now divorced. He thought I was fucking with him. You're leaving us hanging here. What did he do for work and for fun? Divorcing people. Ross Geller? I was visiting a relative in Oberlin, Ohio, who invited me to go with her to a student piano recital. She didn't know who the pianist was that day, but she often went to student recitals. When we were seated in the recital hall and given a program, I saw that the performer was one of my former piano students. What a wonderful surprise for both of us. The closest I got to this was my parents buying my best friend's piano teacher's house. She died. It was fun for me. She died. It was fun for me. I met a guy at my staff Christmas party with the same name, birth date, and was in the same career. We met through our girlfriends at the time, both named Jennifer. We shared many of the same physical features, same colored hair and build. I still Google him from time to time to see if he has died yet. If he dies first, I win. If mods want to contact me, I can prove this. It's fucking nuts. You're gonna die together. I was born in the exact hour that my auntie died. Apparently I'm the spitting image of her. Respawn complete. Unbeknownst to my sister and me, our mothers-in-law met in a third town and became BFFs. It finally came out like this. Mill. My Dill is going to Thailand to visit her sister. Don't you have a son in Thailand? My Mill. Yes. And my Dill's sister is visiting them soon. In high school me and my best friend were obsessed with a Japanese pop group that's relatively unknown in the United States. One day when I was out shopping with my mom, I picked up a Magic 8 ball and asked it if I'd ever see the group in concert. The ball said yes. I scoffed and put it back on the shelf. The moment I got home I got a call from my friend telling me that the group was having a free concert in a nearby city and she'd gotten tickets for both of us. What was the group? Metallica.